Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the second edition of Podar Conversations. Um, Today, we have Mr. D Singh, who is the Managing Director at JP Morgan Chase Bank in India. He heads the corporate banking uh, division for India, and he and his team are responsible for driving multi-geographical solutions for JP Morgan's clients. Mr. Singh has been with JP Morgan since 2010, and he has an overall banking experience of 25 years. Prior to JP Morgan, he spent about 10 years with HSBC in multiple leadership roles. Apart from being a mentor for the Financial Inclusion Lab, which is a philanthropic investment by JP Morgan, he's also the chairman of the CSR committee at a non-profit Adapt. And he's also on the boards of premier educational institutions at Mumbai and Pune. We are extremely fortunate to have him here today to talk to our students and engage with our community at large, and also share his insights and experiences into fields like leadership, finance, banking, etc. Thank you so much, VD Singh, Uncle, for taking out an hour on a Saturday to address everyone.
My-
And, without further delay, I would like to pass on to you to introduce yourself, and then, we can take it from there.
Sure.
Over to you.
Thank you, Vedant, for the very flattering introduction. I think it's very easy to give advice, especially on leadership. And thank you, all of you, for listening. I must first congratulate you for creating this platform for your students and making sure that uh, voice from the industry actually reaches out and there is a real world touch that everyone can get. So life is, just but a collection of experiences, and if one can share a few of them and someone can benefit for them, I think that's the best thing you can do. And that's why I'm saying the noble work you've done here in creating this platform is truly admirable. From my end, I think if I can just share a few things and then hand over to you, back to you, Vedant. Just like I said, with the collection of experiences, you have to learn to manage a few things. In my particular case, may resonate with some of you, and therefore I thought I should share it. There are two voices that you always have to deal with through your life, right? Even when you are a child, it's the voice in your head, and it's the voices around you. In my particular case, I think I've been very fortunate to be working with people who've been very supportive, to be working for people who've also been very encouraging, to be able to learn from their experiences over this journey. The voices in your head, I think that is purely personal, left to you and figuring out, what's right, what's wrong. But the only thing I can say is you have to set yourself some very ambitious goals. You have to work backwards to have actions to achieve those goals. And again, not to take life so seriously that if you don't meet exactly the goal that you want or achieve exactly the rank that you have desired so badly to, then it's not the end of the world. There's a lot more apart from that. In fact, only you know what your position, designation, rank means to you. The rest of the world just sees you as working somewhere or doing a business or whatever. In fact, when we were interacting last year with Falguni Nair, who everyone knows from Nayaka, she was telling us what you do when no one is watching is what matters most. And that's where the voices in your head, I think, are so important to you. The other small thing I just like to say, which I think young people do take for granted, is the network that they create at a young age. So please don't underestimate the power of the network. You, of course, have to adapt. You have to have the curiosity. There is learnability. You have to continuously add skills. And all of that is something that I think all of you know very well. But I just thought these few other things, the softer parts of it, I could bring out and before we start our conversation. So over to you, Vedant. Hope to bring out, flesh out a little more of some of this stuff as we chat along this morning.
Thank you so much, Uncle. So one question which came to me straight away while you were talking is, just to get in the flow, is there are a lot of times when the two voices which you spoke about are contradictory, in the sense that you want to do something which may be a different career path, a different decision, or so, and then people around you may tell you something different. This can be family, this can be friends, this can be your peers, etc. How is it that, during this conflict time, you can, decide which voice you want to listen to, and you should not, like, give up your passion for something which is very dear to you, due to the influence of what others are saying? How can you,
Yeah.
block out that noise sometimes, or how could you decide that, okay, this is actually a better path for me, or this is not the better path for me, when you have so many opinions around you from society as well as from yourself? I'm sure in your career path you would have gone through this situation, where you had something which you wanted to do, and then something which maybe people at JPM or people at HSBC or people in your family were telling you. So I would love to hear anything related to that, from you
Yeah,
on this
Vedant,
topic.
I think it's a very pertinent question, and thank you for bringing it out. I do think, firstly, the advice and people, the voices around you are hopefully largely well-meaning. Some of them may not be, but you're smart enough to figure out which ones of those are well-meaning. So you have to also take it in the right spirit rather than stick to the voice in your head. But I'll share examples with you or some kind of life experiences with you, which may just help clarify a few things. So when I was leaving my first banking job and taking up my role with HSBC, I left behind the large stock options. Uh, in those times, that was a lot of money for me, but I was very focused on the fact that I wanted to work for a foreign bank. And I was told if I want the job, I will have to move to Delhi. I basically lived all my life in Bombay and Maharashtra. And a lot of people told me Delhi is not for you. You're going to fail there. You're a guy who's not built for that kind of aggressive business atmosphere and so on and so forth. Well, I did go for it. And the reward for me from there was to get transferred to Chennai. And again, I think a lot of my colleagues, sang this one song that uh, you're going to be a complete misfit. This is the end of your career, and so on and so forth. Well, I didn't really pay much heed to that, and honestly, merit found its way beyond anything else. So the way we were judged was largely based on merit by the business community in South India, despite the fact that I looked like a North Indian, or the fact that I had largely lived in Bombay, and that's where my network was. Uh, and of course, when I started my career as well, picked from campus, I think there was a huge fight to get into treasury, investment banking, all the fancy jobs and fancy roles. The consolation prize was trade finance or some other specialized role in the bank, and I got retail banking. And that was again, a lot of people told me you should switch jobs, you should move out of this place. Retail banking is not for you. This is not the right. And honestly, I'm so glad I didn't listen to them, because those 2 3 years that I did retail banking actually did teach me a lot, not only about retail banking, but also about how to deal with people, how people behave, how very very difficult situations can be managed by just making sure you're on top of the detail. So as they say, retail is detail. uh, as a reward for the performance that I had with my colleagues in retail banking, I was allowed to move to corporate banking, which was the holy grail of banking in terms of how do you lend money in the most risk-free manner or in the most successful manner, and get the right return for your client from your clients, and make sure that the solution is a win-win. So that's again where one learned how to say no. In retail banking, you were always taught how to say yes. In corporate banking, where you had money going out of the door, you learned how to say no. And I remember particular incidents with lots of pressure, and these were the voices from outside. I even got yelled at by the famous Vijay Mallya. He told me, "Don't call me Mr. Mallya, call me Dr. Mallya." So he was that upset at whatever was going on in those days with him when he was doing really well. So I do think that balance is very important. And my only advice would be to play the long-term game and not get distracted by short-term noises, voices. If your goal, like my goal was to be in banking, my goal was to be a holistic banker. So all the switch and ditch and cribbing about stuff is really not going to get you too far. So you got to play the long term game. You got to take some calculated risks. You got to figure out different roles. Nothing goes waste, right? And Vedant, of course, nothing is without consequences as well. So, like when I was in the south, and I did have to work really hard, travel a lot, multiple locations to be covered. I missed a large part of my son's childhood, his growing days. So these are the consequences that you have of taking up certain things. But yeah, that's part of life, and these are the compromises and voices you have to deal with. There is that voice in my head now that always tells me, "Don't miss something again as important as this." But you can always look back and think of many things that may be good, bad, and you can learn from them. And that's why, like I said, to begin with, experiences is what matters. And if you can share that and people can learn from those experiences, nothing like it. And that's what would make you somewhat of a leader. Everyone, in fact, of us is a leader. Without each one of you, there wouldn't be so many things that would be happening around.
Thank you so much. That was very insightful. Something just to pull out from that discussion which you gave, you spoke on the importance of long-term thinking and not getting distracted by short-term voices and everything. So how does one ensure two things? A, with so many changes happening in the external environment, especially due to tech, with industries changing constantly and jobs becoming obsolete and then new things coming up. How does one ensure that they are able to adapt to those scenarios in their long-term plan? And at the same time, um, how do you not get distracted? There's so many exciting things day in, day out, like you said, with people saying, do this, do that. How do you manage to stay focused in those kind of scenarios and, know your goal and decide it at the right time so that you can stick to it?
Yeah. So, Vedant, as you would know as a young professional yourself, 80% of your job is BAU activities. It's the 20% where you really want to do that, and that is what gives you the zing and makes you want to come to work every day. Uh, so, trying to distill what exactly drives you, I think, is again the voice in your head which you need to listen to. But uh, to your more specific question, I think you have to have throughout your life, in fact, in anything you do, even in your personal life, you need to have the curiosity to constantly absorb new things that are around you. You need to have the agility to be able to, take over some of those. So, for example, like you mentioned, without digital skills, young people are nowhere. If they do not have the digital skills, they're not going to be able to make it too far. In fact, all the other skills can be learned over a period of time. But if you miss out on the digital skills, then it's going to become more and more difficult. You're going to get left behind further and further away. So you have to continuously add to these skills, and which is why I talked about earlier learnability. So you have to continuously add to your arsenal of skills, and something may catch your curiosity, and something may take you on a different path, and that's why I think you have to also be flexible in what you do. There are always choices that you make, and I said earlier, there's nothing without consequences. So the choice you make will have a consequence, and you will live with it for the rest of your life, and there's nothing wrong with it. But you must know that there will be consequences. A little bit of consistency in what you do does help. So if there are 10 things that excite you, probably you could pick two or three, pursue those, and be consistent. At least take something forward to the next level and the next and the next. uh, if you just try to do everything at the same time and take nothing to the next level, then you're really not going to be very much better than the person next to you. And I think that may be the most important part, right? How are you going to differentiate yourself? If everyone's done exactly the same thing in their career, in their profession, how are you going to be slightly different from the person next to you? So you're very right. One needs to constantly upskill. One needs to constantly adapt. And of course, if you're not curious, you'll never get anywhere.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much. I think Professor Kshitij ji has his hand up. Do you want to say something, sir?
If I can come in with a question, Vedant, can I?
Sure, sure, absolutely, absolutely.
Uh, Allow me, Mr. Singh, to represent a lot of professionals who are in the audience and few students coming from law, business, and humanities background. And I'm sure they are listening to you for understanding the sort of work you do. And allow me to represent them and ask a question, which is very work specific. Could you please give us a glimpse of how your day goes like in your specific position, little empirics of the specific work that you do? For instance, I'm asking in my head because I'm not from banking. I'm a lawyer and I'm a law professor. Uh, is it a lot of client meetings and understanding their specific requirements of specific investment proposals that your bank would want to make to them? Or is your typical day occupied, because you are in a senior leadership position, is your typical day occupied in internal organizational management, which is a lot of emailing and Zoom conversations and office meetings? Or is it a lot of business development meetings? You are procuring and meeting new clients. If you could give us empirics, and so that we can get a glimpse of being in your office. Imagine if I was an intern, what all would I get to know spending a couple of days with you? Really empirically, that would be very interesting to know.
Sure. No, Kshitij, I'm glad you brought this up. Banking is now seen as an old world, old economy kind of a role, old economy job to be doing. Everyone wants to join a startup or be a tech guru or do something more exciting. I think the most exciting job in the current environment is to be a banker. And why I say that is because of the kind of exposure one gets to different business models, to what your clients are doing, to the kind of issues that different diverse businesses, diverse industries face within India, outside it, to how difficult or easy or exciting it is for a foreign company to come and establish a beachhead or a business in India and take it to the next level. So I do think banking is a very exciting field to be in right now, whichever part of banking you are in, because there is so much happening in our country, and we're really lucky to be here at this point of time as in business. In terms of what you mentioned about a typical business day, yeah, of course, each day is different. There is a mix of all of that you mentioned. So there are client meetings, there are client calls. These are basically either these are new clients or those that we desire to do business with. These clients have very actively embraced digitization, moved to the next level in terms of looking at economies of scale, in looking at efficiencies, and that's where I think some of the solutions that banks can provide to them to operate more efficiently are the ones that we're trying to take out there. And which is why I think some part of the day is always to do with some of this. There are existing clients who require certain things which may be episodic. So you may read certain things in the newspaper about large company raising money overseas, or tying up some kind of a solution within the country, or some kind of business consolidation happening, which I think is the most exciting part, which you see in the newspaper almost every morning. So I think it's really exciting to be part of some of these transactions, whether it is on the financing side, or making sure that they are able to get the bid across the line, or trying to make sure that the client on a more BAU, more basic solution is something that we can provide. There are three different segments of coverage that the bank provides. This is at a very high level. Publicly known information is all that I will be able to share in this forum. So financial institutions, large local corporates, and MNCs. And like I mentioned to you, each of these would have some very similar requirements and some very diverse requirements. So being a banker's bank, even what an Indian bank requires in terms of risk management, what they need to do overseas, how we can help them in efficiently deploying or raising money or assets is something I think which would also occupy some part of my day. A very important part of the day is also interacting with the team and making sure that everything that is required or is being escalated is actually firstly known, and then whatever can be solved is solved or escalated or pushed up or pushed down, and does get to some kind of resolution. So if I can put it very simply, you're the face of the bank to your corporate or a financial institution or MNC customer. The client will come to you with what they require. You will figure out what solutions would help them, and delivering those from whatever you need to do internally, whether it is meetings or calls or escalations, or will really help. And that's where I think these two parts of the day will be divided in terms of figuring out what is required and making sure it's being internally delivered. So, like I said, through my journey, I've been truly fortunate to be associated with some very bright people, both those that I work for and those that work with me. And that is the enriching part of the journey. You spend more time with these people than you spend with probably anyone else that you are close to. And if these people are the ones that you admire, you like to work with, you can collaborate with, then I think it makes the journey a lot more pleasurable and enriching for all of us.
Right. Thank you.
Gil, so one interesting question which is driving me is, how did you land up in banking? Like, how did you make that choice that, banking is a sector you want to do? Because in today's times, like I said, everyone is so confused. What should they do? There are so many opportunities around. How did you decide that, banking was your thing? And since you've been in it for 25 years already, how did you manage to stay passionate about it and, continue with it?
Yeah, Vedant, this is the pre-internet era that we are talking about. So we had very little exposure to the rest of the world. After my engineering, I got a job in SEEPS. This was a company that used to make switch mode power supplies, very exciting young company in the manufacturing space, for a company called Apple Computers. In those days, to hand on my heart, I didn't know what Apple Computers was, right? But in 8 months down the line, I did realize that maybe I need to do something more, and that's when some of the memories that one has of smartly dressed, well-respected bankers who were able to shut shop well in time where the rest of the world was still working. I think some of that was playing in the back of your mind when you decided that this is one of the most respectable professions, until of course till more recent times when everything that bankers do is known to the world in a more transparent manner. But jokes apart, I think it was something that I always had respect for. It was a profession that I always thought that was very exciting, and money was always something that was a pull factor. I was never very good at mathematics. I was never very good at accounting, but I did enjoy the basics of finance, and I was very excited to see what exposure bankers had and the manner in which you could make a difference. So, long answer to what you're trying to say, and that's what kept me motivated for the last couple of decades as well, is the completely fresh experience one has with every interaction you have with the outside world.
No, thank you so much, for sharing that. It's very interesting to know, given that you were so clear in your thought process and you managed to stay on with it is very inspiring in its own way. I'm sure, during this career path, you have had multiple difficult incidents or experiences like you were talking about earlier, where, maybe it was you had a tricky project with a client, or you had some miscommunication with the team, or so on and so forth. Since we are dealing with people, there's always some difficulty or the other. So can you, share some of these difficult experiences which you have had during your journey, and what you learned from them? A couple of them or so would be really helpful, I think, for the audience to relate and take out some learnings on leadership, banking, and in general as well.
Sure. So I'll share an experience very early in life, Vedant, and one more recent, so as to try and again bring it to life. As a very young branch manager, probably the youngest in the industry at the time, that was, one became a bit, what should I say, arrogant, and was able to. So there was nothing that I thought I was not able to do. So if something in the branch wasn't working or wasn't functioning, I was sure I could fix it. And one of these more humorous incidents related to the ATM machine. Cashier wasn't there, and so I sat at the cash counter on that day myself. And this is not needs any rocket science. And at the end of the day, when the ATM ran out of money, again read the instruction manual, was able to put the hundreds in the hundreds and the 500s in the 500s, until I came back the next morning with a like a mob standing outside the ATM machine. The machine was dishing out notes that were chopped in half. And that's when I realized that one needs to open the staple. In those days, currency notes were stapled. So the machine was cutting them in half and dishing them out. So I had the other half inside the machine, and those are some of the humbling experiences that one learned, that even the most easy tasks require some kind of expertise, and you really can't take things for granted. Of course, no experience goes waste, and I'll always remember this one in my life for sure. I'm not sure if my bosses at that time knew about it to this detail, but but it was an interesting one. I think more recently, when we all switched to digital, one had to sort of change your leadership style, or figure out what could work in a digital work environment. And I think that is where a lot of challenges do come up. What is the future of work? How do you actually continue to stay engaged in this kind of an virtual atmosphere with all constituents and stakeholders, internal and external? I think that was a true challenge of the way one ran the business, and some of the changes one needed to make uh, in the way we were actually managing our daily lives.
Definitely. I mean, I'm sure the pandemic had its own set of challenges, not only for the banking sector, but also in terms of how teams function, especially global teams. Where, as part of JP Morgan, I'm sure you have to deal with teams based in Hong Kong, Singapore, maybe in Europe, etc. So working together, the entire landscape would have changed, and that would have had its own set of challenges.
Yeah.
Would you have any experience or something related to, that pandemic phase which you were going through, which you would want to share, which could give us a bit of insight into how you and the banking sector in general, faced these difficulties and dealt with it within their teams also?
Yeah, interesting experience that I had is that I was marooned in Boston. Couldn't catch the last flight out when the entire ban and travel ceased. So I was marooned there for a while with the time difference and the uncertainty, which I think was getting to all of us. I didn't know if I'd ever come home, if I'd be alive, if what was happening outside. So it was a very, very, very scary situation. And I think that was a true challenge of how you could continue to do what you were supposed to do and still manage your daily chores, right? So that's an interesting incident that I will never forget in my life. The other thing, in terms of how I think leadership styles are changing, we've always heard of leading from the front, right? And that is probably the military style of doing things, or the stuff that we've always intuitively felt is the right way to lead. But learning from what Mr. Ravikant, who was the earlier vice chairman of Tata Motors, has to say, he talks about leading from the back, right? And how you can lead from the back and let others be in the front, where the big picture is not lost, and there is a collaborative outside in approach that he talks about. So I think I've learned a lot from some of these discussions on how you can have a big plan, have an action orientation, and then work backwards to achieve it, but not necessarily that you need to lead it from the front like an army style, military style, giving orders, but rather more collaborative, being in the background and ensuring that you remove the obstacles and let others continue to do what they're doing well. So I think those are the few things I think the pandemic has also taught us, is to make sure you work in a more collaborative style, remove obstacles for others, and stay in the background to make sure they're successful, rather than have to lead from the front in a very different kind of way.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So, Nikhil, what do you feel is, the hardest part of your current job in this, you know?
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? I think I have a very hard. No, I think we're very lucky to have to be in the place that we are. So yeah, I think I don't know. Probably people management is a important part. May not be the toughest part, but is probably the most critical part of the way managers, at least in banking, need to be in the current environment, with the rapid changes that are happening, with unseen black swan events coming up every few years. No one could have thought what we've gone through in the last 3 years we will ever go through. So these are the kind of new challenges that I think you have to be aware can happen, and you should be able to deal with them on the go. And that's where I think that agility is most important.
Absolutely. And do you have any lessons, uh, Uncle, in people management, since you spoke on that? You have, like I said earlier, interacted with clients in the front end, with your team at the back end, with seniors, with juniors, with so many kinds of people. What are some lessons, which you could give and advise us as young professionals entering basically into the industry, as well as senior pros who are here on this talk today? And how can we address these people management concerns? How should we shape ourselves to deal with kind of people, so that we don't have conflicts, we are able to collaborate, and able to use and form solid networks and build relationships with everyone around us.
Most important part of what we do, I think, relates to people. And that is because anyone can acquire a skill, anyone be up to date with current affairs and what's going on, innovation, curiosity, and all of that, as an individual performer, is the best part of what you can achieve as a young person. What you need to achieve as in a collaborative environment is where the challenge lies, and which is why I said every one of you is a leader, as opposed to the earlier days where you had one leader and everyone needed to listen to that leader and do precisely the bidding of that of the leader. In this environment, in the collaborative approach, being able to make sure that you have the big picture, you also have the ability to go down to the detail and meet your ambitious goals, balancing, I think, what I said earlier about the outside in approach. But if you lose the big picture, and or you get too involved in the detail, uh, the collaborative approach may not work as efficiently, and vice versa as well. If you're too big picture, um, or you get into too much detail, both sides will be an issue. In working with people, I do think different strokes for different folks. Nothing is the same. Every human being is different. You have to figure out what motivates, drives, or makes someone tick. And people change, right? You change yourself. So people change. Keeping a watch out for that change, making sure you know what they're going through, the personal connect, which could be at times very, very important. Which is why I think in a digital or a virtual environment, we are missing this personal connect, and we probably don't know what the other individuals are going through. We have a very business focused, mercenary kind of a discussion without understanding what are the other things playing out in the background. So very important to be collaborative. If you are successful, uh, remember that success is not going to last forever. So in your times of success, being humble, being graceful is what matters, so that when you are not successful again, at that time you are able to ask for help, and there's no shame in doing that. And in those kind of environments, I think working collaboratively is probably the most important part of where we will.
Sir, is there some disturbance on your end?
No, somebody I think mistakenly has unmuted the mic.
Hmm.
Yeah, great. I think you managed to
Yeah,
mute.
did
Mute
that.
that.
Yes, thank you so much. I mean, definitely. And
Great. I hope to answer the question
absolutely.
in my own way. I was just trying to stress on the importance of collaboration and the new normal, the new different style of leadership, which is, I think, most important, which all of us need to recognize. The other very important thing, Vedant, is when you see people doing things, very senior people doing things that stand out to you, remember that when you are in a similar situation, you don't repeat something like that. So I think those are the important learnings which you shouldn't let go of when you have a chance to have an exposure, even if it is not a most very positive interaction. You should remember that so as not to make the same mistake again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, thank you so much. Because I think we've taken enough of your time in this fireside chat. Would want to give the audience a few minutes for Q&A as well. But last thing I would ask you is, if you had any advice specific to the younger generation, to everyone on this call, to everyone who hears this talk later, whether it's on YouTube or on our website, etc., what would you advise us to do, in our careers, or how anything which you feel is the most important lesson you've learned and something we should all keep in mind as we go forward in our careers?
Yeah. So hope is your soap, right? Use it daily. I do. So I would just say stay positive, stay focused, set big goals for yourself. Even Ratan Tata invests in startups not because he needs to make more money, because he wants to interact with young people. So the future is, you are the future. You're the guys with all the creative ideas, with all the innovation, and I think every big leader also wants to interact with people who have all the right ingredients, and not any one person is probably going to be able to give you all the right ideas. So make sure you have a wide network and are able to get the best from every interaction that you have with your family, friends, colleagues, students, co-workers, and that's the best that you can do. And probably use your time wisely, because like I said, everything has consequences, including the way you use your time.
Yes, thank you so much. Um, Now I think I'll pass on to Q&A to Ramya. She will moderate the Q&A. If anyone has any questions, please ask on chat or feel free to unmute. And we'll be happy to ask uh, PD Singh uncle, who's taken out his time. Ramya, I think someone does have their hand up,
Yes.
so I'll just pass on to
It's Shritaji. Shritaji, do you want to start? Kick it off.
Yeah, I'll I I would force Mr. Singh into some technicalities with this question. It's more like a B school class question, and I would love for you to be that B school professor. Mr. Singh, a large part of your job and your bank's job is risk assessment, is to look into projections, look into future of national economies, of global economic projections, and within that framework, specific business entities, be it at a startup level or even at a very matured age lifespan level of that business. And I want to present to you this little case study as a question, which we ourselves are going through at Podar Eduspace. We are an education tech startup, our vision is to create an ecosystem of experiences where industry veterans like you, early career professionals, and students can come together on platforms exactly like these to share, create, and mentor experiences. But we launched ourselves in extremely uncertain times. We launched ourselves when the entire world was online. Students were online, campuses were online, businesses were working from home. And right in the middle of when we were designing our vision, we were designing our future strategy, immediate term strategy, long term strategy, the world was transitioning from being online to going physical, especially the stakeholders we deal with. Imagine if we were to sit with you and in a in a possible conversation to raise money, and we were to present to you our business ideas that we are a startup, and you were to look at our projections. How would you address this particular challenge that we are facing? Because this is not specific to us, this is multi-sectoral. Amazon online sales have dropped for the first time in 5 years by this extent. The shares have gone down. Almost all online business entities that were seeing immense potential in future, they've had to revise their business numbers in the last 6 odd months because of the back to being physical transition. If you can give us some technical know-how of how do we as a business, and this would be a lesson for many other business interested people in this conversation, how do we look into these projections when how do you basically go into projections where circumstances are beyond your control? You have no control over the war in Ukraine. You have no control over the regulatory compliance in India, where data privacy laws are now being discussed in the parliament again, and that will have a bearing. How do you control campuses being online? These are variables which you cannot really put down on paper. So, from if we were to sit with you for those projections to raise money, imagine how would you advise us? How would you guide us to look at this transition not as a challenge but as an opportunity in some technical detail?
Yeah. So, Shitish, firstly, if it's too good to be true, then it's not, right? So that's the common sense approach that we would follow. The second aspect in terms of projections is there have to be certain scenarios, right? So we would take the worst case, the case, and the most likely case, look at those cases. Thirdly, if the variables are so stark as you mentioned, as in there is a massive collapse of the business, then really is this a business worth supporting anymore? Now, those are two, three things that one would look at. So sustainability is key. Uh, are we? Is this a sustainable business? We are not talking here about valuations. We are not talking here about ratios and other technical analysis. We're talking about sustainability of the business itself. So I think those are the key two, three fundamental things that I would at least look for, and again are more common sense in approach than very technical. In terms of once you have ticked all these boxes, then we would get to the most likely scenario. We would get to looking at why the projections are where they are and what are the key pitfalls. If, for example, you mentioned the regulatory risk. So if the regulatory risk is too high, I think then possibly bank finance is not for you. Then maybe there are angel investors, startup funds, and others who would be the right set of investors for you. Because bankers look at stable cash flows, past performance. We look backwards, equity looks forwards, and therefore you got to look at who exactly are you pitching your idea or your investment or your business to. So therefore, no right or wrong answers, but just to make sure that you've got the right class of investors that have the risk appetite to come to invest in your business or to give you debt or equity or whatever support that is required from a fundraising point of view.
Mr. Singh, in that conversation with a business leadership talking to you, would you call it a wise decision? Because at times I've experienced that what I'm going to tell you is not optically considered as a wise decision, and it is when you hit a transition like this, which is extremely uncertain, and it hits your sales and it hits your balance sheet. You want to take at times a U-turn in your business strategy, or at times a left or a right turn. But in terms of the optics to your stakeholders, it may not be taken very well. It may come across as lack of conviction in your initial business idea. It may go across as you did not formulate your business plan very well. But as a business leadership team, what else do you do? So do you stick with your uh, plan of changing and adapting according to the transition, or do you cater to the optics?
Yeah, I think some of the best businesses today were built because the word they use is pivot, is to change their business strategy based on the circumstances they have. In fact, some of the best startups we have today have constantly innovated or reinvented themselves over a period of time. So to answer your question, I don't think it's the wrong thing to do. It's just that the life cycle of the business, and what life cycle are you in when you make this decision? Are you too far down the line, or do you have the ability to have? Sometimes it's just a question of having a bolt-on business or a bolt-on acquisition or some kind of additional things that you need to do, which may take your business, of course, in a completely different trajectory, which is not wrong again, because as a businessman, you need to make sure your stakeholders and the investments they have made are, their objectives are met. So very high risk strategies based on your stakeholders, or very conservative, or somewhere in between. So I think it is exactly what the stakeholders want, the investors, the employees, the other stakeholders. And if the environment is really challenging you to make that U-turn or make a different business plan, then why not? If there is an opportunity that you think can be monetized, then why not do that?
Right. Thank you. I have so many questions, but I would let others come in and Ramya moderate. Ramya, thank you.
Thank you, Kshitij. So we do have a couple of questions, and first question is from Rahul, who is asking about what is your leadership style?
Yeah, so honestly, like I mentioned to you, leadership is now not the way we used to lead in the past. You have to do the right thing with the most integrity, clarity, and display the vision to your team. But at this point of time, I think the way leadership works is to work collaboratively with your teams be rather than direct them in a manner that would make them meet the ultimate result that you want them to. So to answer your question in a more in a simplistic way, I think feedback is given best immediately rather than you waiting for year-end appraisals and stuff like that. So my style is to be pretty direct, in your face. What you see is what you get, kind of a leadership style.
Nice to know. You talked about, sir, you talked about having, a collaborative leadership style. How do you ensure that, there is constant communication between your subordinates and you? Because from what I understand, in India, it's very hierarchical, the structure itself. How do you ensure how that works out? Because I'm pretty sure
So
people
I
will
think
be
that's the pandemic has really helped in flattening out organizations. And here I'm not talking about my organization. I'm talking about our organization was always quite flat, but I've seen in general organizations have flattened out. Access to senior leaders has become more democratized, if I can use that word. In a Zoom environment, it's much easier for people from various levels to interact with other people from different other levels as well. In fact, even cross-cultural, cross-country interaction has become a lot easier and more accepted. So yeah, flat organizations is the way to go, and it has somewhat been forced upon by the way the pandemic has helped us in this transition as well.
I guess there was one thing that came out good out of the pandemic. Okay, so another question from Rahul was about what was something that you did, and what was the last time that you did something and you regretted it, and how did you tackle it?
Yeah, in fact, I do things I regret every day, so that's a tough one for me. But yeah, I think one has to be really cautious at times in also in the manner in which one provides these kind of feedbacks, whether they are to your stakeholders, internal or external, because in the current environment, people are going through a lot which you may not be fully aware of. So I'll give you an example. A very senior person in another organization, uh, she actually shared in one of the forums that we had that why do you assume that I want to work from home? I live in a large joint family and I'd give anything to get out of the house, right? So there are others who there are 3 or 4 people with their digital devices trying to do Zoom calls in the same room, and therefore again they are not really very happy to work from home. In some other cases, we are losing the organization culture because people are just staying home, and we're not. What is culture, right? Ultimately, culture is a shared sense of purpose. It is all about these goals and ambitions and working backwards and the action plans that I'm talking about. So if all of that cannot be even communicated because we are not all together in a common place, we are not able to share the formal and informal learnings as well, then I guess organization culture will ultimately deteriorate to a point where people will just be like workers in a gig economy working from home, doing your bit that gets plugged into a program and you get an output. But that's not really how business is done in the real world. So a good balance of these two, I think, is going to be the way we're going to see things evolve in the future.
Okay. You talk about balance, like I've heard you talk about balance a couple of times. How do you manage work and life? I mean, we talk about work-life balance, and I'm aware that JP Morgan is quite famous for not having a work-life balance. How did you manage to do this?
Yeah.
How
Yeah,
did
no,
you
firstly, I wouldn't like to comment upon JP Morgan's work-life balance. In fact, I don't have any such complaints, so I'd like to say that very
Okay.
clearly. Yeah, I do think we are very focused on making sure that people do have at least their weekends free, and it's depending on the workload that we load our people with stuff to be done. So JP Morgan is a good place to work to set that right. But overall, I think now this is a personal view that I have, and I'm telling you about what I think. I think if you like your work, then your life and work are pretty much the same, and therefore then there is no real question of a work-life balance because you're always working and that's part of your life as well. That doesn't mean you don't have other interests, and it doesn't mean that you don't do other things, right? So for example, I love music. I love collecting old records. I have a collection of HMT watches. I like old cars. I have a collection of a whole lot of other esoteric stuff. So it doesn't mean I give up on my life because I need to work, but it does mean that I'm able to find time to do everything and make it a very holistic experience for myself on a daily basis.
Nice to know. Yeah. Okay. One last question. It's about sustainability. Sustainability has been a hot topic, and you have been a part of banking for 25 years. How do you see finance and sustainability coming together?
Yeah, I think this is the most critical part of the way forward now. There is no option but to make sure that your financing is for a sustainable future. And to that extent, I think you will find enough and more information on what various financial institutions are doing in the public domain, including what my bank is doing. There is a whole body of information, knowledge, and guidelines that have been set out. You've seen what's happened after the Paris Agreement. There are every single business that we are dealing with right now has a path towards this, and these are externally verified benchmarks that they set for themselves. There is a clear goal and a clear timeline by when these have to be achieved, and I think that's becoming a very integral part of how financing is being done, whether it is in the country or outside.
Nice, nice. Last question from Akash is about, you talked about, what you do what do you do behind like what people see? So sometimes things that you do in your personal time and that shapes you as a person. What do you do in your free time, and how does that come along?
Yeah, like I said, one has to be cautious as to how one spends their time, because you have only that much limited time to do various other things. So giving some time, making sure you carve out some time for yourself to do the things that you want to for your own interests. Uh, Very important to make sure that you have not ignored the family. There is enough time for the family, and again, that is a very critical part of how all of us count our own well-being as well. So I would advise young people not to ignore the families, their relationships, their friends that they have, and making sure that their network only gets larger, and they are able to cope because they have such a large network of people that they can lean on for various things.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mrs. Singh. So I think that's all with our questions and chats. Is there anything anybody wants to ask? You can switch on your audio and ask them directly. Oh, Shataji has another question. Shataji, please.
Mr. Singh, we at Podar Eduspace, we are focusing on some cutting edge post-pandemic 21st century skill sets that the entire world is talking about, and especially young professionals are really consumed. I am not convinced enough whether that consumption by these young professionals is wise enough, but they are consumed by artificial intelligence and the blockchain technology, NFTs. Uh, are organizations like JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, uh, are you guys incorporating these technologies? Have you made decisions to maybe bring in blockchain technology and developing softwares and algorithms to assist you in risk management, risk analysis? If you could guide us about that, and that would give us a glimpse of how large financial institutions uh, are also incorporating these technologies in their working styles.
Sure. So what I'm going to tell you is in the public domain, and therefore nothing special that I'm telling you. But to bring it to life, JP Morgan has used blockchain technology to tokenize currency. So we have something called the JP Morgan coin. It's just a token which settles back. One coin is equal to $1. It settles back into the same at the end of every day. We're currently using it as a pilot with a few large clients, and largely to settle within JP Morgan branches as well. Another use of the blockchain technology has been for financial institutions. I did mention that we are also a banker's bank. So how financial institutions settle transactions, especially cross-border transactions, money moves quite instantly, but it's because the information that is required to satisfy legal and regulatory requirements in every jurisdiction are different, or the information is not complete, is why sometimes the money takes long to reach the desired account. And this goes through many intermediaries. So having a blockchain, which is basically the most secure way to transmit information to one another. This is bank to bank transmitting information to one another in a manner that is that has an audit trail and that is verifiable and credible. That is one of the use cases for blockchain technology. There are many such apps that JP Morgan is now putting on in this platform that is called Link, which again you can check, Google it and check what Link is. So Link is the platform where such applications are being made available to financial institutions to make money transfer frictionless. The other issue, for example, banks have is they transmit money and find that the account on the other end may not be genuine, or maybe missing information and the money comes back or whatever else. So you could actually, to make it simple for your audience to understand, like a penny drop. So you could actually validate an account that is with another bank. So one bank can validate whether or not the other bank has an account and whether that account is genuine to the extent that is used for normal transactions before transmitting the money, which is an easier way of doing it than first you transmit the money and then figure out there's a problem and then it gets stuck somewhere and it has to be sent back. So setting some of these digital rails in place for the banking industry with blockchain has been very valuable. These are actual live use cases which are now currently functioning. You talked about AI very extensively being used in banking. Some of it is in the public domain, some is not, but very extensively being used by banks across the world. uh, I would think it's only a matter of time where certain functions do get automated. This is my personal view, do get automated, where we currently have human intervention, because I do think the machine can, in fact, learn faster and be more reliable in auto-correcting errors and certain other things. And again, it is this. A lot of this could be to do with the movement of money across the world.
Very interesting. I think we would love to carry this particular clipping from your speech, because this conveys our point to early career professionals and lawyers and business students, especially in Indian university ecosystems, where a law student wanting to work in corporate law firm in Bombay does not yet see value in learning blockchain technology. They still think it is the job of software developers, and oh, I have to deal only with some drafting and argumentation. Similarly, a marketing business student in a B school yet does not see value that he or she should learn artificial intelligence and its incorporation into modern day institutions. So this carry forwards the point that these technologies today are not operating in isolated vacuums of just software development and their testing and operation. They are pervasive. They have invaded into every space. And I think times soon would be there when people like you would be interviewing people, and your minimum required skill set for professionals to be hired will include these skills. We will soon be.
As I mentioned, earlier when we started this conversation as well, new age digital skills are a core requirement. You may be able to learn other stuff on the job, or you may be able to learn other stuff later, but not the other way around. And nobody's going to wait for you to come on the job and then learn new age digital skills and coding. So I think you're spot on. We do need all of these new age skills to be at the very least a hygiene factor when you look at young people and look at their longevity in being able to contribute to an organization.
Right. Thank you so much. Over to you, Vedant. Thank you.
That was a lovely question, Kshitij, and brilliantly answered by himself.
Yes.
What an inspiring talk for all of us here. To thank you and Rajiv and my behalf also for accepting this thing and addressing all the children here, and really a lot of use, as Vedant said correctly, on YouTube and social media. Whoever has listened, they have a lot to take home.
No, my pleasure, and it's been a very interesting conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Vedant. Over
Thank
to
you
you
so
for
much for joining in and for being a part of our second Podar Conversations initiative. Just to inform the audience a little bit and take a minute, we will, on the quest of becoming an even bigger knowledge ecosystem, continuously innovate to launch new upskilling courses, as well as we're coming up with the professionals placement internship program in the next month, which should be something exciting for people who want to intern in various industries and gain some experiences. So yes, just to get back, so Podar Conversations is part of that process of building that knowledge ecosystem, and we're very fortunate today that we had you come and address our students and take out the time on a Saturday afternoon. Very grateful, and I'm sure there was a lot to learn for each one on this call, be it if they're in their 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s. There was definitely something to take away for each and every one of us, and really appreciate you taking out the time and coming and addressing everyone at one instance. Thank you so much, Uncle. We look forward to a long-term relationship with you. And thank you
Thank
so much to
you.
everyone who joined as well. We look forward to
All
seeing
the
you next month for the next edition.
all the best to all the students, and a very good day to all of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.